from engine to the wheels, that is drive wheels, is called the powertrain. That means when we go in sequence, the engine, the torque converter or the clutch, the transmission or the gearbox, then propeller shaft and universal joint, then differential, axles and final gear. These are all components in a sequence is called the powertrain. Now in this powertrain, we have discussed elaborately about the engine, transmission, differential, axles and final drum. Now the remaining one, that is universal joint and the propeller shaft, we will be discussing in this video and the subsequent video. In this particular video, I am going to talk about the propeller shaft. Friends, this is the chassis of a vehicle. You observe here is the engine, this is the clutch or the torque converter, this is the gearbox or the transmission, and this is the differential. These are the axles inside the vehicle connected to the wheels. This complete setup from engine to the differential or the axles is called the powertrain of a vehicle. Powertrain. In this powertrain, we discussed about all these things except the one what we are going to talk about now. This one, the center horizontal one, this is called the propeller shaft. The propeller shaft is installed in the vehicle to transmit the torque, that is the rotational force, from transmission to the differential. And this propeller shaft is connected at one end to the transmission with a universal joint and also at the other end with another universal joint to the differential. Why the universal joints are required? Why not a shaft can be directly connected to these both members, we will discuss. When you observe the vehicles, the propeller shaft looks like this. This is the transmission, this is the differential. In between there is a propeller shaft. These are the universal joints. About this mechanism also, why this tubular section is not uniform, why it is larger, why it is smaller also we will discuss. When you observe this figure, this is the transmission end, this is the differential. Here you can see the other member like a bracket. This also we will discuss. Why this is required here to support this one? Because the length of the propeller shaft is much larger than this propeller shaft. In fact, you can see the other universal joint, one more universal joint here. This is called the single piece propeller shaft. This is called the two-piece propeller shaft. When the distance between the transmission and differential is more, a two-piece propeller shaft is installed. Okay. If it is short vehicles like jeeps and other small commercial vehicles, the single piece propeller shaft is enough. If it is a length vehicle like trucks and all, two-piece propeller shaft is installed. Why two-piece propeller shaft? Because it is very important to ensure the length of the propeller shaft is as short as possible to avoid the vibrations during the operation. When you see in detail about the construction of the propeller shaft, these are the universal joints which we'll talk later. This figure actually representing the two-piece propeller shaft. This portion is called the yoke of the propeller shaft. This portion is called the tube. This tube is made with steel. The propeller shaft is made a tubular section steel, a high quality steel, by adding some additives, carbon fibers, glass fibers and all. And this is the yoke, and this is the shaft, and same this end also is the yoke. Both sides the yokes are welded to this propeller shaft by adopting a special welding process. Propeller shaft is a single piece, this is a two-piece propeller shaft. Certain parameters have to be kept in mind in designing and manufacturing the propeller shaft. The first one, why the propeller shaft is made in the tubular section is, it is essential to minimize the total weight of the propeller shaft as much as possible Otherwise, if it is a solid shaft, that itself will consume a lot of power for its self-rotation. Point number 2, a rigid or solid shaft will always having tendency to sag or bend. The shaft sag or bend, the vibrations generated will be more, and the consequential failures also will be more, not only on the propeller shaft but the connected parts. So to avoid such vibrations, also tubular section is required. And the quality of the steel and the welding process adopted in manufacturing the propeller shaft should possess greater resistance to the sag or misalignment, and the quality of the welding and the quality of steel used in manufacturing the propeller shaft should possess good torsional strength. And also the shaft should possess low resistance or low inertia to changes in angular speeds, because the propeller shafts in the vehicles do not run at constant speeds. Propeller shafts always run at variable speeds. This is how it looks. Why not a rigid shaft? Why the universal joints are required? These figures will explain. If you observe these two figures, you can see the axis of the transmission, the axis of the differential. They are not in the same line. In fact, here in this figure, they are parallel to each other. Means the level of the differential in any vehicle is lower than the level of the transmission. The axis of these both components will never be in same line. To accommodate this difference, flexibility is required in transmitting the torque from one unit to the other unit. How the flexibility comes? The flexibility comes only a kind of moving joints. If it is a rubber coupling, the flexibility will not come. If it is any other kind of solid coupling, the flexibility will not come. To get that flexibility, the universal joints are fitted at both ends. Here also. Here, why the third universal joint? As explained to you, if the distance between this transmission and the torque differential is more, use two-piece propeller shafts. This is one propeller shaft, this is the another propeller shaft. These two propeller shafts are connected with third universal joint, because here also flexibility is required. This axis is different, again this axis is different, and here you cannot connect this directly to the transmission because of various reasons during operations. And sometimes it is not necessary the axis of this front propeller shaft and axis of the transmission will be same. Here also there will be difference in between the axis of these two will be there. So this is the two-piece propeller shaft supported with the center bearing. This is how a propeller shaft looks like this when it's running. Imagine this is the transmission, this is the differential. If you observe this, how these universal joints are flexible, it is inside, gradually it comes out. This flexibility comes through the mechanism adapted in the universal joints. And now let us discuss about this center portion. Even though it is a single propeller shaft, it's not made with single tube. There is a joint again here. This is separate piece, this is separate piece. This is called the slip joint. A propeller shaft must have the slip joint in any vehicle. Why this slip joint? Observe this. This is the wheel, this is the suspension. When we are driving the vehicle, roads will be having a lot of up and downs. When the wheel comes on a bump, it goes up. When it goes up, You can see this figure. This is the center point of the differential. This is the center point of the transmission. At this point, this is fully extended distance. Measure this distance. It is up to here. When the bump comes, when wheel goes up, the distance varies. The distance in fact retracts, shortens. So as long as we are driving the vehicle, this is a continuous phenomena in the vehicle. That is, change of the distance between the differential and the transmission is a continuous phenomena as long as we are driving. So how to accommodate this change of the distance between these two members? It's only through again having a kind of slip joint which keeps altering the length of the propeller shaft. So to accommodate change in the distance, continuously the length of the propeller shaft also should be changing depending upon the driving conditions. How the change in the length of the propeller shaft is possible? Only this kind of a slip joint. How this slip joint works? One end of the shaft is having this male shaft with splines. The other end of the propeller shaft is having the female splines. This male spline shaft is inserted into the female splines, and when the vehicle starts jumping or moving up and down roads based on this distance, this shaft will be moving inside the splines of this female spline shaft. So for smooth movement of this shaft, lubrication is provided through the multi-purpose grease or the molybdenum grease, and a lubrication is provided by a grease nipple arrangement, and in this cap a rubber sealing is provided to prevent the grease leak from these splines. This is how a slip joint works, and you can see the slip joint looks like this in the vehicle. This is the center bearing used in the two-piece propeller shaft. This is the metallic steel bearing, and this is the rubber cushioning member to give cushioning to this bearing, and this is the rubber boot protecting this bearing from the dust. This is the sealed bearing. This is the sealed lubricating bearing. And another important parameter of the propeller shaft is the quality of the welding process in joining the yoke and the tube. A special process is adopted in welding the universal joint with yokes. And another one is the balancing of the propeller shaft. Any shaft connecting the two members, any rotational component connecting the two members should complete the dynamic balancing. The balancing will be done by adding the weights at desired level in the balancing machine, or in some cases by removing certain material. This will be done at the manufacturing stage. But when we need to do the balancing in the field during servicing of the propeller shaft, there is another method is available for some propeller shaft, but not for all this propeller shaft. We can do this balancing with the help of these clips, because the clips will be having here at the screw place. This screw and the screw holding body acts like a additional weight. So like this, there is a special process, and based on the process or the guidelines of the propeller shaft manufacturer, the balancing needs to be done for any propeller shaft. This is about the propeller shaft. Please go through these 3 pages notes. In case you have any doubts or queries, you can contact me through the email.